scope of the project. Now, some of you know my story with Genos. I went to the Singapore conference last year, and I was the newbie. I had done my certification with Dave Smith only a week before. So I was fresh, I was open-minded, I was eager, I wanted to learn everything. And what I was going to do is I was going to take all my learnings back and run the Ignite program back in Australia with our leadership team. Well, I got a little punch drunk in Singapore on all of the great products and things that you can do with Genos. And so I went back to Australia afterward, and I decided to revise the scope completely. And I went to the key stakeholders, and I said, why should we just train leaders? These are life skills. They're applicable to everyone. Let's train the whole company. And this is what we did. So I'll tell you a little bit about the method that we used. So the first thing I did is I ran an introduction to emotional intelligence session. Now think, a couple hundred people who most of them were not familiar with emotional intelligence at all. In fact, most of the responses or reactions I got was, emotional what? What kind of intelligence? Right? So I felt like I needed to get everyone on the same page at the same time to explain the basics, the fundamental of what we were talking about and why we needed to bring it into the business, why it was critical for them to survive and thrive tomorrow. So we did I put together, it was kind of half my own stuff and half Genos stuff, and we brought everyone together. Now I ran several sessions of this to canvass the whole country, so I had to do multiple times and dates in different states, but I wanted to get everyone on the same page before we did any kind of surveys, before we did any kind of program. So I've got a couple slides here that were just key highlights. Now the session was about an hour long, but I've just cherry-picked a couple of the slides that really worked, really resonated with people, because these are the things that if you're talking to people that are saying, emotional, what? These are the things that really worked. Before I go on, so from that session, we then put people into two different cohorts. So we did an applied emotional intelligence program, which was based on the 180 workplace behavior assessment and the one-day emotionally intelligent leader program, which we just rebranded to call it applied emotional intelligence. So anyone who was not in leadership went into that cohort. Anyone who was in leadership went into the Ignite program. So we explained that in that introduction session so everybody knew where they were going to be, what was going to be expected of them, what the training was going to look like, what the survey process would look like, etc. So a couple of the highlights from that introduction session. We talked about the fourth industrial revolution, right? Because it helped people to understand where we are at. And especially in a company that focuses on automation and digitalization, they get this. They may not have ever seen it in a slide before, but they understand it. In fact, most of them didn't know there were 4 industrial revolutions. But when you start explaining the timeline, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and you tell them that between 1, 2, and 3, there was roughly about a century of time for people to get used to it, a century of time for businesses and economies and infrastructures to adapt. But between 3 and 4, we narrowed that gap significantly. And now we are in a place in history where we are moving at a speed that has never been precedented. Now that resonates with people. So now they know, okay, this is where we're at. Yep, we know it, we've just never seen it laid out like that. And then we talked about the future of jobs. So I pulled this quote out. By 2020, more than a third of desired core skill sets of most occupations will be comprised of skills that are not yet considered crucial to the job today. Social skills, such as persuasion, emotional intelligence, and teaching others, will be in higher demand across industries than narrow technical skills like programming or equipment operation and control. Technical skills will need to be supplemented with strong social and collaboration skills. Now, if you're not already using that quote, do it, because 2020 is what, 2.5 months away? Yeah. Right? It couldn't be more timely. The World Economic Forum has dropped this nugget of gold in our laps. Use it. And again, it helped, to put that with the fourth industrial revolution to help people understand where we're at and to say these are skills that you need. And guess what? You are in a technical occupation. You are an equipment operator. You do program software. So get up, get up to speed, or you will be left behind. Then we talked about the world of work we live in. Now, these next slides are Genos's, and they've been kind enough to allow us to use them. But we asked people, what does your normal feel like? Now knowing all of this stuff and understanding where we're at, what does normal feel like to you? And this opened up some great discussion that kind of fed beautifully into these slides. So this slide and the next slide, I got so much emphatic nodding of the head up and down, I thought we were going to get whiplash injuries. Because everyone feels that their normal is a 24/7 work pattern. Do more with less. Increase complexity and uncertainty and continuous change. Right? Who doesn't feel that way? Who doesn't feel that that is what is expected of us in any organization, in any corner of the world? That's normal today. And what employee hasn't at some point in time themselves or known someone who has felt anxious, stressed, worried, fearful, disempowered, uncertain, or victimized, right? And then you ask any business leader what the culture feels like, and they'll tell you reactive, aggressive, problem-focused, etc. So let's reimagine that with emotional intelligence, and then you ask people, is this what you'd prefer the company to feel like? Is this how you would prefer to feel at work? Relaxed, with purpose, valued, cared for, consulted, and empowered, right? And it didn't matter, in my company, it didn't matter if you were an apprentice mechanic or the vice president. This resonated. It resonated with everyone. So these are the things that worked for me to get the company on the page, on the same page, to get people excited. Now, that quote cannot be overused, can it? Yeah. Oh, and then, so all of that technical stuff behind. Now we start talking about how people make you feel, how you make them feel. So I used Jeff and Debbie's EI experience in that session, the introduction session, and it was brilliant. So we looked at, if you're not familiar with that exercise, it's, on one side of the page, it's the best person you've ever worked with for or around, how they made you feel, how long ago it was, and what kind of discretionary effort you gave. And then you flip it over, and that ignites a lot of passion to do the flip side of that too. I also use that, I was telling Debbie, I use that as an interview question. So for anyone who does interviewing, ask someone, think of the best person that you've ever worked with for or around. How would they describe you to me? And then, the flip side, it really shows you a lot about their self-awareness, their authenticity, and it kind of almost allows you to ask them to do their own reference check. Now, I'll tell you a story from the Genos conference last year that kind of relates to this, about Derek McKinn. So at one of our morning tea breaks last year, I went out and wanted to get a cup of tea. So got the cup, got the tea bag, look around, where's the hot water? There's the hot water. Derek's standing in front of it, talking to someone. So I kind of, snuck my way over, didn't want to be obtrusive, but, was waiting for that right moment to just, boom, say, excuse me. Yeah. That didn't happen, no. Instead, what Derek did, and without missing a beat or taking his eyes off of the person he was talking to, he shifted his body, so he opened up his shoulder and his palm and slightly stepped back, making a space, and with his body language inviting me into the conversation. Now, then I was stuck. I was then in the conversation. Hot water is still on the other side of Derek. But a couple minutes later, we parted ways, and I felt like a dog who had just had her tummy rubbed. This complete feeling of validation and satisfaction. And I have used that story in some way or another, sometimes a little bit more colorful. I've used it maybe a dozen times in the last year. And I cannot tell you who Derek was talking to, what the conversation was about, or even if I ever did drink that cup of tea. But I will never forget that feeling in that moment of just that subtle shift of the shoulder and opening of the palm that invited someone into a conversation. Thank you, Derek. So these are the things that worked. Now, the initial feedback. What did people have to say before we even launched into any of the assessments or any of the programs? What did they have to say about just that alone? It's about time Cargotec did some training like this. At the end of the day, we're all human. We forget that. It's easy to focus on the job and forget the human side. I wish more people got the importance of empathy and understanding each other. We don't do enough of it with each other or our customers. It's really critical for business success. Yeah? I can already see how much this program is going to help my team to be better aligned and on the same page. Now, that's pretty cool from people who didn't know what emotional intelligence was. There were challenges. Of course there were challenges, right? All right, so a couple of the challenges that I encountered. Competing priorities. Don't have time. Oh, plate's too full. Cup runneth over. You know, please don't ask me to do another training. A lot of those things came up. Something I learned as an internal to an organization doing this is that I already had a very strong know, like, trust factor with the employees. So there were times where I almost felt taken advantage of because there was already that established relationship, where it might not have happened the same way if we'd had an external consultant come in, where people would cancel an hour before the training and come, oh, sorry, Nikki, I've just got, something's come up, okay? Can I do a makeup session? Is that all right with you? And the first cohort, I was really eager to please. I really wanted maximum participation. So I bent over backwards for people, and this ended up happening. My plate got very full with makeup session after makeup session after makeup session, and to the point where it started to impede on my other priorities. So as I did more cohorts, I started giving training dates up front. And finally, I just, the Ignite program, I give all 6 up front and say, if you have a conflict, tell me now. Otherwise, please save this date. And then trying to elicit their seniors to make sure that they got their bum in that seat that day. So that was a learning that I took away, was, sometimes the more they trust you and the closer to the fire you are, sometimes the more you can be, taken advantage of. Well, after that introduction session, we launched the survey process. So all the balls went up in the air at the same time. And if you think this was, over 100 people, so about 137 at the end of the day, that's a lot of participants and a lot of raters. So even though I very clearly said in the introduction session that, you have 4 weeks, or you have 6 weeks, or you have 8 weeks, depending on when their particular training date was coming up, this is when the survey process will end. People still procrastinated, waited till the very last day before you close the survey period, and then came to you with complaints saying they were bombarded with too many requests for surveys. I'm not quite sure how to overcome that, people's procrastination, but it was a challenge that I encountered, was a lot of people felt very overwhelmed by the process. And then, again, because of that special session we did to get everyone on the same page, that was fine for the one-day workplace behavior program. But with the Ignite program, it made modules 1 and 2 a little bit clunky. So again, I explained this up front, and what I did is I had one session. So there was actually 5 sessions of the Ignite. So 1 and 2 were one session together. And I had my slides were very clearly labeled, module 1, page 9, module 2, page 5. But still, it just felt a little bit clunky. So if I were going to do this again, and if I were going to do it the same way to a company who didn't have exposure to EI before, I would probably still do that intro session to get everyone aligned and excited. But I would probably consult with Genos on how I could do this a little bit better so that modules 1 and 2 flowed a bit nicer together. So those are just a couple of my key learnings. And lastly, trying to keep everyone on the content, on the material. As Ben was talking about the wheels falling off. So again, having that really high know-like trust factor across the business. And I also have a dual capacity role, so learning and development, and I'm the second in command for HR for the country. So people I knew their issues. I knew the situations they were talking about, which was causing them stress and frustration. So in the sessions, they kind of almost opened up into, mass complaining sessions, or trying to keep the language clean there. So that was another challenge was, and there were times where I actually would pull people aside at breaks and say, look, I know you're really passionate about this topic, but it's not really relevant to what we're discussing today about authenticity. So I would appreciate it if you want to talk about your individual concerns, that we do so after the session is over. And so that was effective most of the time. Okay, how about outcomes? So after all the training was said and done, the employees who participated in that Introduction to Emotional Intelligence session, 97%. Leaders who participated in at least 3 modules of the Ignite Leadership Program, 98%. There's always one. Leaders who completed all 6 modules, so the intro session counting is the first and then the 5, 86%. Now, the only reason for that decline in the 12% is we did some restructuring and there were a few managers who exited the company during that process. Blue-collar staff who completed the one-day applied EI program, 62%. Now, that is really significant because that's where I had to negotiate and get the unions on board. And I'm not going to take time to talk about the unions, but that's a different conversation. And so to get 62% of our mechanics and electricians in a room to talk about their feelings was pretty awesome. I'm pretty happy with that. And our non-blue collar staff, so our office-based staff, who completed the one-day applied EI program, 93%. All up, we had 91 staff and 37 leaders complete a Genos 180 or 360 survey and participate in one of the 2 programs for a total of 128 participants. Thank you. So feedback, what was the feedback like? So I'll start with the one-day program. Over 90% said that it was between a 7 or a 10 for effectiveness. Did your personalized 180 feedback report assist you in understanding your strengths and opportunities? 83% said yes. Do you feel your self and other awareness has increased as a result of this program? 93% said yes, it has. What areas did you find most valuable? So the feedback report and DISC were rated the highest as most valuable parts of that one-day program, followed by ladder of inference, resilience and mindfulness, SCARF, and science of emotions, the neuroscience model. One of the questions in the feedback form was, what changes or improvements have you made as a result of this program? I'm now trying to really understand why I react the way I do to certain things. Yes! It makes my job so much easier. I'm recalling the ladder of inference to prevent myself from saying things I may mean, however, could be expressed in a different manner. Thinking twice before reacting. Are my assumptions correct? You getting a theme there? Yeah. Listening and understanding the other person's point of view. I'm asking for feedback a lot more now. And I'm becoming more inclusive of personality types I don't necessarily bond with. Just after one day of exposure to emotional intelligence. All right, the Ignite program. Let's look at those results. So I'll start with the group comparison report. So this is what, Ian was talking about yesterday. Fingers crossed, what does this look like? Yeah, after all of the cohorts were done, I was really, really excited. Okay, prepared to be inspired. Okay? So we showed a positive improvement after 12 months of 2%. I hope you're still waiting to be inspired, okay? Because I haven't gotten there yet. All right, so you can see that in my company, there's quite a bit of average or lower emotional intelligence, right? All right, but we've just started this journey. Again, we got people off of really big machines with greasy hands into a room to talk about their feelings. So, we made a 2% improvement. All right. But I also thought, wait, I'm not really happy with that because that's not consistent with the feedback that I got over the 12 months. I got emails and text messages. Hey, Nikki, guess what I did today? Or better, Nikki, guess what I didn't do today? Right? People told me after each session how inspired they were, how much it meant to them. I heard stories from employees about their managers, and it just wasn't consistent with these results, right? Here's the breakdown. So we made a slight improvement in all the other categories, except authenticity. We took a little bit of a dive, but not too bad. So I started to think, what could possibly cause that lack of movement when everything I've been hearing is so overwhelmingly positive? And then I had a thought. We took the whole business on the journey with us, right? So the raters in time 1, when they got to time 2, they were much more informed. They had gone through training themselves. Who in this room has a teenage son or daughter? Susan, how old are they? 14. Okay, so not quite yet able to drive. What's his or her name? Caitlin. Okay, so if I ask Caitlin, if I went up to Caitlin, say, hey, Caitlin, how good of a driver is your mom? She might say, well, I don't know. She doesn't crash the car. She hasn't killed me. So 4 out of 5. Yeah, 4 out of 5. Sounds good. Yeah? Now, let's go teach Caitlin how to drive. Let's show her what's involved, what kind of skill it takes, what kind of practice it takes to be a good driver. And at the same time, let's put Susan through some advanced defensive driving courses, right? And then let's go back to Caitlin 6 months or 12 months later and say, hey, Caitlin, how good of a driver is your mom? Well, she's going to have a more discerning opinion at that point because she knows what's involved. So she might go, right, well, she always uses her indicators. She doesn't exceed the speed limit. Yeah, she doesn't run red lights. I'm going to give her a 4 out of 5. Now, the movement wasn't anything because it was a 4 out of 5 to begin with. But it was really actually very significant. And that's what I think happened based on the feedback that I got along the way. And the raters' comments. Okay, now this is where you get to be inspired. Okay? These were some of the comments that I pulled directly out of the reports. He is much more aware of his moods and behaviors. He has always offered useful guidance and advice in areas of expertise. Now I feel I can go to him for more personal growth feedback. I'll tell you, I want to be a fly on the wall for that performance review. He is honorable about everyone in the workplace by the way he speaks about them when they are not listening. This defines authenticity to me. The way he speaks about them when they are not listening. How cool is that? He is noticeably trying to listen to everyone in the team and get suggestions before making decisions, and then helps everyone to understand the decision. If he feels his emotions are getting the better of him, he instantly apologizes and tries to correct things, which is great for everyone in the team. And my favorite, he has started saying thank you more and gives me positive feedback, which makes me want to get up in the morning and come to work. Yes! Now, I'll tell you, the rater, the person who wrote that comment, is a 24-year-old apprentice mechanic. How awesome is it that he has a leader who is inspiring him? Thank you to that leader for influencing someone in such a way. You are setting this young man up for success. And how is it that easy? Is it really that easy to say thank you more and give some more positive feedback? That can actually make someone want to get up in the morning and come to work? Why aren't we all doing it? All right, so the feedback from the Ignite participants. So this is post-program, their own words. How would you rate the effectiveness of the Ignite program? 96% said between a 7 and a 10. What areas of your EI have increased as a result of this program? So 82% said their self-awareness had increased, and 57% awareness of others. Would you recommend these Genos EI programs to others in the business? 100%. Yeah, right, I know. Okay, Genos partners and practitioners in other countries, this is a plea for help because as you saw, I got 100 countries. There's a lot of company to cover, especially in Europe. So I would love to see these programs, and this case study can be used as what happened in Australia, and we're already making noise around the rest of the business to our senior managers in APAC and Finland to say that, hey, these are the results we got. Now let's take it bigger, let's go wider. Because 100% of the employees in Australia think it's worth your time to consider. What have you done differently as a result of this program? I'm trying to be more alert to the emotional needs of the team. I'm more mindful of the way I interact with people, my choice of words, and general demeanor. I think I've improved my communication and am focusing on working calmly under pressure. I've increased the frequency of positive feedback with some people, and I see the difference it's made. I'm understanding that what you are thinking doesn't always make it out to the people you are dealing with. Right? Love that. And I give feedback more than I used to, and I'm not so concerned about using feelings in that feedback. Now that gentleman is a senior test engineer, and when he came into the Ignite program, he was all just black or white. Now, show me the science, show me the data. Don't talk to me about the way I feel. Don't talk to me about authenticity or honesty. So he came a long way. Okay. Now, one of the questions that I asked was, how has the Ignite program been game-changing for our business and life-changing for you? Now, I got a lot of really cool responses for this, but I did select my favorite, the one that was most personally important and special to me. I want you to meet Sean. Everyone say hi, Sean. Hi, Sean. Now, I won't lie, this is a licensed image of a model, but with a very strong resemblance to Sean. So my search criteria was to make him as much like Sean as I could, complete with the beanie and the tattoos and everything. Now, Sean was a late addition to the Ignite program. And in fact, he had just been promoted from, he's young, and it was his first time being promoted off the workshop floor. So, having basically a daily casual rate to supervising a team. And his manager felt he needed as much help as he could get. So we put him into the Ignite program. And Sean had some behavioral or disciplinary issues earlier in the year. And we knew that he was going through a tough time outside of work, so there was mitigating circumstances that we factored in. But I have to be honest with you, he made it hard for my conscious biases to not come to the surface. He was always late into the room for training. He would sit there, leaning back, arms crossed, and he did a look of apathy really well. I was not expecting Sean to get very much from the Ignite program at all. And then I got this feedback. As far as life-changing for me, the first thing I want to say is thank you. I've had a really trying year so far with some challenging life and work situations. Without the emotional intelligence program, I would have handled these situations a lot differently and probably very poorly. Thanks to the Ignite program, I've been able to work some stuff out in a calm and professional manner with better communication. I still have some ongoing matters, but I feel confident that I will handle everything with better emotional intelligence moving forward. Life-changing. Now, when I got that feedback, this is how I felt. This is it. This is why we do what we do, yeah? Yeah. This is it. This is what it is all about changing lives one at a time, even the ones that you don't think you're touching at all. All you have to do is turn your shoulder and open your palm, and someone's going to remember that feeling 15 months later. Okay, now, I said we'd come back to safety, yeah? All right. I want to show you the before and the after. The year before we did Genos programs in our business and the year that we did them. All right? So here's the rolling 12 months before we launched Genos. So we started in September of 2018. So this was literally the year preceding Genos. We had 7 lost time injuries. We had 21 injuries requiring first aid, 18 near misses, 18 unsafe acts, and 127 unsafe conditions. Now, an unsafe condition, that could just be like the carpet's torn or that cord's sticking out. So it's, the chairs in front of the fire escape. Those really aren't a big deal, but, that's where we were at that time. Now, the year that we did Genos, that we helped the whole business move the needle forward with their emotional intelligence. For lost time injuries, wait for it. Keep waiting. Yeah. 1. 1 lost time injury. Now, lost time injury is anything from 1 full day of work to anything that doesn't kill you. That can include total and permanent disability. We reduced our lost time injuries by 86% the year that we ran Genos programs. Injuries requiring first aid, 17. So we went down by 4. 4 less Band-Aids. Near misses, 36. Now that is really significant. You know why? Because near misses are things that didn't happen but almost did, right? They're the things that get swept under the rug because nobody saw it. People do not report near misses unless they feel psychologically safe to do so. So the fact that we doubled that, I think, is amazing because people felt psychologically safe to say something almost happened, but it didn't. Unsafe acts, we dropped a couple, and unsafe conditions, we dropped 28. But lost time injuries, I'm going to go back there because that 86% less lost time injuries. All right? Now, numbers are great. I love numbers. I love statistics. I know we got a lot of statisticians and mathematicians in here. I love numbers. You do too. But let's put some human next to that. What does 86% look like? All right? I want to show you a lost time accident or lost time injury that happened. So this was in April of 2018. So this was the year before Genos. And this was not our company or our employees. So this was not one of the 7. But these are our machines, so we were involved in this. All right? This is in Port Botany in Sydney. So Sydney residents, you might have seen this on the news. These 2 straddle carriers collided. They're manually operated, which is why we don't use them anymore since we went automated. But these are older machines of ours. You can see in the foreground, the white cab up on top is fully intact. But the machine in the background, that cab was ripped off. The driver, a woman in her mid-50s, fell 7 meters, 23 feet, to the pavement below. She broke multiple bones, but her worst injuries were closed head, so swelling on the brain. She was put into an induced coma for several weeks. Now, I don't know the outcome to that story because eventually you stop asking because the answer is always the same. But I can almost certainly say that that woman's life will never be the same again. But she didn't die, so it's a lost time injury. Right? Now, multiple reasons could have caused that accident. I don't know them. I would guess it was lack of attention or focus, probably were dominant factors. But one that was cited was it appears the company has failed its obligations due to a lack of consultation in the workplace in the lead up to this tragic accident. What's another word for consultation? Training. Emotional reasoning, training, yeah? Or just communication? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just there. What we have here is failure to communicate. I think that's what it really comes down to. And that's one of the reasons it was cited, was a failure to communicate. It probably set a domino effect into place of factors that caused an accident that nearly killed someone, but definitely changed their life forever. So when we talk about 86% less lost time accidents, when we talk about going from 7 to 1, I like to think of it as 6 lives. 6 people who did not leave work that day in an ambulance. 6 people who did not undergo multiple surgeries. 6 emergency contacts who were not contacted that day. And possibly 6 children who didn't have to ask any hard questions. That's what I see when I look at those numbers. And there are skeptics and there are critics, and they will say, nah, it's not because of emotional intelligence training that you went from 7 to 1. No, we improved our risk assessment process. We do better JSAs now than we used to. We did more technical training that year. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. Because I don't think there's one factor that can take a company from 7 lost time injuries down to 1 in 12 months without a combination of supporting factors. So they are absolutely right. But what would Brene Brown and FDR have to say about the critics? It's not the critic who counts. It's the 6 lives. To me, it's the 6 lives who were not affected that otherwise could have been. So some people, still continue to say emotional intelligence is optional. We need the technical training. That stuff's good. Genos is good, but it's optional. But is it? Don't take my word for it, though. Look at the evidence. So McClellan shows us that after supervisors in a manufacturing plant receive training in emotional competencies, such as how to listen better, lost time accidents decreased by 50%. Grievances went down from 15 per year to 3. And if that's not enough for you, the plant exceeded its productivity goals by $250,000. Now, I like 86% better than 50, but the point is the evidence is out there. It's out there. We're telling a new story now at Cargotec. We're telling a new story about a business that is much more than equipment operation and software development. It's about human interaction. It's about creating a safe working environment for everyone, both physically and psychologically. It's about understanding the business's goals and the customer needs and bringing the right tools and technology to lead and collaborate on business initiatives. Emotional intelligence is a set of skills that will get you there, and it is certainly not optional. Thank you.